Hey everyone, welcome back to NDC, and today we're going to be recreating Instagram's home UI. Now this is mainly going to be focused on UI creation, but I'll do my best to provide some tips on how you can actually add some functionality if this is something you want to kind of look to create, some social media feed. So we're going to break it down into small reusable components from the top bar of stories here to the post of feeds, as well as a placeholder bottom bar where we kind of have that tab navigation. Along the way, we'll use VStack, HStack, ZStack, ScrollView, LazyHStack, and LazyVStack. So if you're wanting to learn how to recreate this on your own and apply your own twist, let's go ahead and dive on in. All right, and because we're using SwiftUI, I'm going to be using Xcode, and I'm going to be creating a new Xcode project from scratch. So make sure you have Xcode downloaded. It's now in version 26 with the new macOS 26 as well. Make sure we're on iOS app for our template. Make sure we're on interface SwiftUI and language Swift. We won't need testing or storage today. I'm going to call mine Instagram recreation 2. Starting off in our blank content view here, I'm going to go ahead and get rid of our VStack here. So we should just have the view, the variable body, some view, and then nothing else. We're going to actually be starting off with a ZStack as we want to control the background. Or if you don't want to have a background at all, that's totally fine. So we're going to set our color to be anything we want. I'm just going to go with the system background color. Now we're also going to make the ignore safe area set to all. This is going to allow us to have this background take across the entire screen. So if we refresh our canvas, we'll see that our entire background is all the same color. If we were to change this to be blue, there we go. I'm going to put mine back to the system background though. Awesome, so that's taking care of our background. We're then going to do a VStack, and this VStack is going to hold all of our different views. Something I'm going to be doing is actually setting the spacing within this VStack to actually be the value of 0. I want everything to be very tightly connected. So in our content view, this is where all of our different views are going to be coming together. And we're going to be breaking down the views one by one and then adding them to the content view at the end. You can create this all in one Swift file. However, it's better coding to break these down into more modular files. So on the right side, we're going to create a new file from template. Make sure we're on the SwiftUI view. And we're going to call this one top app bar. This is going to be that top bar where we can see things like our messages, those notifications, the title of our app. So I'm going to go ahead and remove the placeholder, and we're going to start off by creating an HStack. We want that top bar to be kind of horizontally aligned. Let's go ahead and add some text, and for this we'll add the title of our app. Since I'm recreating Instagram, I'm just going to use the title of Instagram. Obviously feel free to customize anything that we do during this tutorial. Okay, so for the font, I'm going to do system, so I have a little bit more control over the size. I'm going to try 28 for mine, and I'm also going to add some weight to it. Let's go ahead and make it bolded. And we can also add a design if we'd like. You can do monospace, rounded, etc. I'm going to try default and see how that looks. We can refresh our preview and we should just have the text of Instagram on our screen. Now something you might also want to add is called kerning. And this is going to set the spacing between characters. So we can set this to be 0.5 to get more control over the spacing of those elements. If you want to make it larger or less, totally up to you. We're then going to add a spacer, and this is going to push all the elements over. So since we're using an HStack and a spacer within the HStack, it's going to say, okay, after this element, put as much space as possible to the right of it. So this is going to be the leftmost element that we have, just like with the Instagram homepage. We're going to create another HStack, which is going inside this current one. Pretty crazy, I know. And then we're going to add some spacing. And this is going to allow us to space out those different elements. We're going to be doing the plus to add a story. The heart, I think, controls likes or people who have liked your messages or posts. And then also the paper plane in order to show those messages. Let's go ahead and add our brace and hit return. We're going to open up the object library. You can do so with the Command-Shift-L. And I'm going to head on over to the symbols tab on the right side. So the first thing I want to add is the plus sign. And the plus that .app, I think, is the best representation of the Instagram kind of homepage. You can drag and drop that in, or you can type it out. We'll then want to also add the heart. Again, just going to be adding that to the project. And then we're going to be adding the little messenger kind of paper airplane. Right before we do that, I'm going to let our preview load. Something you may notice sometimes with those messaging apps is when you have a message, it'll kind of show a little number in the top right. So I'm going to recreate that for our messages here. And I'm actually going to do so by adding a ZStack. And this ZStack is still within this HStack. So we have the topmost HStack, another one embedded, and then finally that ZStack. So we're going to add the paper plane. Yeah, drag and drop that on in there. That's the first element. And then on top of that, we want to add some text. So for that, let's say I have 3 messages. In a real app, you would control that number based on the amount of actual new messages that the user has. Let's go ahead and then add some styling. Ooh, automatically added some font of caption. I think caption 2 is probably going to be the best option. And I'm going to set the foreground style to be white. If we refresh this, we'll see that our paper airplane will load, but the text is not very visible. It's very, very small. I don't even think you could see that no matter how much you zoomed on in. So we still need to add a little bit more customization. Add some offset. So this is going to offset it from the ZStack. The default middle of the ZStack is kind of where objects lie. So if we change this a little bit and we adjust the X value, we want to push it over to the top right. So we'll use some numbers. Let's try 8 and -8 for this. You will need to declare that you're doing the Y value, of course. Let's also add a background. And maybe we'll have it be based off of a capsule. And then the fill, we can include a color. So let's have this be color.red. Okay, let's go ahead and refresh our view and see what that looks like. Okay, the view is a little bit clipped still, but we can see we kind of have that little 3 kind of popping up and saying we have 3 new messages, which is great. Something I would like to do, because these are all really small, is let's go to the end of our HStack here. And with these SF images, you can actually adjust all their sizes by using the font. So for this, I'm going to try title 2, and this is going to increase the font size and again, the image size of all these elements a lot more. There we go. So we kind of have our 3 messages. Pretty cool there. I think I'm also going to add, just to make it a little bit cleaner, a little bit of horizontal padding. Let's set that to be 5, and a little bit of padding for vertical as well. And let's set that to be 1. Just to make that capsule a little bit bigger. Yeah, there we go. That's more clear that we have 3 messages. Okay, now let's apply some styling to the entirety of the HStack. I love doing the trick where you double click on the end of the braces in order to apply styling. And let's add some padding overall to be horizontal. As you can see here on the Instagram and even on the messages, sides horizontal, they're going to the entire phone screen. It's a little bit scuffed. And let's also add some padding for vertical so we're not all the way on the top when we do add this to the content view. So let's add some vertical and maybe 8. We can always come back and adjust these as we see fit. It's also nice to put them in their own Swift files, so it's like, oh, the top bar, I know where to go to edit that. Let's add a background here, and we'll also set this one to be system image, or sorry, system background, so it aligns. Okay, let's go ahead and refresh it, see how it looks, and then we'll add it to our content view. That looks fantastic. All right, back on in our content view, let's go ahead and populate that top bar app. Within our VStack, this is where all of our content's going to go. And we can reference our top app bar to be populated. Now, if we just add it now, it's probably most likely just going to, as we saw in the other simulator, add it to the middle of the phone. Not quite what we totally want. Let's go ahead and add a divider afterwards, and it's going to add that kind of bar underneath our title of Instagram. Just adds a little bit of that distinction. Okay, so after the top title of Instagram, we need to add our scroll view. This is going to allow people to scroll endlessly through our content on Instagram. So we're going to add a scroll view here, and we're actually going to take these shows indicators, and we're going to set this flag to be false. We don't want to see those kind of indicators on the side. People know that you can scroll on Instagram. It's kind of like this built-in, you know you're going to be going through all the content forever. If you want to leave them on, you totally can. Within the scroll view, we're going to add another VStack. And again, we want that spacing to be also 0. We want to keep everything pretty tight. From here, we're going to add our stories, then our feed list as well. So let's go ahead and create that new SwiftUI view to take care of the stories bar. Going to create a new file from template, SwiftUI view. call it stories bar. And something I'm going to do just so we can kind of see everything in action is in our content view, I'm going to go ahead and reference our stories bar. Then I'm going to pin our content view preview in the top left here. Now when we go to the stories bar, we still can see our content view. So as we add or change those things, we'll see our top portion of Instagram, and then we'll be able to see our story. So it just looks a little bit better. All right, we're first going to create the view of our story bar, and then we're going to create the structure for the story item. So we're going to also have a scroll view here. This time we're going to set it to be horizontal, right? Those stories go from left to right, right? You have to scroll through them horizontally. I'm also going to set the show indicators to be false here, just as a personal choice. Okay, we're going to be using a LazyHStack. Now this LazyHStack is great because it's going to prevent the phone from lagging like crazy. If you have 100 stories that you need to load, or the people's profile icons, it's going to be a really long time. The LazyHStack is only going to load things when necessary. Let's go ahead and also add some spacing. And that's pretty much it until we create the story item. So outside of this structure and before the preview, we're going to create a new struct, and we're going to call it story item. Now you can also use the template for this if you really want. I'm just going to type everything out. It's pretty quick. This is going to conform to a view, and then we're going to create a variable, which is going to be the username. That's going to be a string value, as well as we're going to have a isOwn, because for your own story, you have the little like plus button to add more to it. I'm going to set this to be a Boolean value, and by default, it's going to be false. We're going to create our variable body, which just like above conforms to some view. And this is where we're going to design those different story items. So we'll create a VStack to start off, and then we can add a ZStack immediately. Because we want those story items to have the person's profile picture, we'll just use a placeholder, as well as the circle gradient that goes around them. If you want to take this even further, you can even do a flag if they're the close friends, where it has that green kind of circle around it. So for the ZStack, we're going to do the circle, and then we're going to do a fill. After that, the linear gradient is going to be our best choice. From here, we can choose the colors, the starting point. I'm going to be using the autofill here to save some time. So for the colors, I'm going to do pink and orange. Make sure they're within those square brackets, because it's an array of colors. For the start point, let's try top leading, and then the end point, let's do bottom trailing. You can adjust these values if it doesn't look the way you want it to. This should give it that nice gradient. For the frame, let's go ahead and add a width and a height. We'll do 70 and 70. Again, objective numbers, we can always come back and change these. We'll then create another circle, and this is where we're going to be adding the person's background, as well as the little person fill icon. If you had actual images, you would replace them here. Okay, so let's add a fill here, and for the color, let's go ahead and use our system background again. We're going to copy the frame here. We want that circle to be unified. And now let's create the circle where we actually have the person's profile. I'm going to add an overlay, and within this overlay, we're going to add the image, which is going to be the system image. And for this one, I believe it's person.fill. Yep, that's exactly what it is. So for the string, person.fill. Okay, before we check it and add more customization, we need to be able to view it. So within the LazyHStack of our stories bar, we're going to go ahead and populate it with the story item. And the first one we're going to be setting to our own. So for our username, we'll just say your story. And then for isOwn, we're going to set that to be true. Let's go ahead and populate it real quick before we add the other ones. Okay, we definitely need to do some fixing there. I think because the circle is completely black, we do need to add a little bit of either removing it, making it transparent, or we can add like a little bit of gray. So let's add a fill here, and let's go ahead and make this gray. We can add a bit of an opacity here. Let's do 0.4. And we might as well add our frame as well before we forget. Okay, let's go ahead and refresh our canvas. There we go. So that's what the base circle is going to look like, although I can't entirely see the gradient. So let's go ahead and take our circle here and let's reduce it by a little bit. Maybe we set this to be 65 and 65. There we go. By making the backmost circle, the one with our gradient, a little bit bigger, we get that nice kind of outlined with the gradient effect. Pretty cool. Okay, let's populate this with people's stories that aren't our own. We're only really declaring that first story item to make sure that we have the user story item always be first. So from here, we're going to create a for each, and I'm going to set this to go from 1 all the way to 12. From here, we'll create an index, so we can call this IDX in. And this is going to be the index of all of our different story members. And from here, we'll populate with the story item, and we're just going to be the username one. We obviously only have the isOwn for ourselves. Let's go ahead and pass through a username, and we'll just put user, and we can actually interpolate so we know where we're at with that index that we called IDX. Okay, let's go ahead and see all of our friends in action. There we go. And because it's the LazyHStack within the scroll view, we can scroll through all of these different items. We'll add some padding. Let's do this one as vertical, maybe 8, to kind of get it a little bit away from the divider bar. It's kind of right on top of that. Perfect, so it pushes it down a little bit. If we also want to adjust the padding of how far away they are with the horizontal, we can. I think they're pretty good. Let's try 10 and see where we're at there. Now, one more thing we will be doing is adding for the story of your own. Oh yeah, and then it also takes it off the side a bit. For the story of your own, there should be something that kind of has like a blue plus button saying, hey, you can add more things to your story. So what we'll do is at the end of our Z stack, we'll go ahead and add some logic. We'll add an overlay, and this overlay is going to be based on if it is your own. So within the overlay, we're going to actually set the alignment. And for this, we'll have it be the bottom trailing, which should be the bottom right. So what we'll do is we'll say if is own, which is that Boolean flag we created. We're going to go ahead and add the Z stack just like we did with the kind of messages up here. We'll create a Z stack. From here, we'll have a circle, and we'll do the fill as the color blue. I think it's the blue plus side. I'm like very certain. And let's go ahead and grab from our system library. We'll grab that plus again. I think the one I want is just called plus. There are some with capsules already though. Yeah, I'm just going to try plus here. So we'll do image, system name, we'll do plus. We're going to apply some modifiers to that. So let's add the font. I think we had done caption and the foreground style to be white. Then at the Z stack, we'll go ahead and add a frame. We can see what it looks like real quick, but I think we'll need to resize it. Oh yeah, definitely need to add a frame because now it's taken over the whole thing. Okay, so this one's 70 by 70. Let's maybe try something like 20. We'll add a width, 20, and a height, also 20. Well, we know it works. And let's also add some offset. So if we want to move it to the bottom right, we need to do a positive X value and a positive Y value. So let's have the X be 4 and the Y also be 4. Okay, let's see how it looks now that it's certainly less cursed. There we go. We might want to move it a little bit more. Let maybe set the Y to 2 or the frame to be a little bit different. Okay, I'm going to try, I think this looks okay, maybe X2. You can always fiddle around with these things and get them the exact way you want. Now the thing is, we are passing through a username here, but we're never actually displaying it. While still within our VStack, so I'm going to use the trick again, and I'm going to go 2 braces here. So again, still within our VStack, we want to have that text that displays their person's username. You can adjust the font here. Let's try caption as well. And we're also going to set the line limit to be 1, just so it doesn't clip all the way down. We can also add a frame for this, and let's set the width to be a maximum of 70. That's the same maximum that we had for the circles. There we go. So we can see your story, user 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. In an actual app, this would be populated with those different people's actual names. But this looks pretty accurate to the story items. Our app is certainly coming along. So the story added that golden kind of gradient ring to mimic the story. We have the kind of placeholder icons, and we even have, when it's your own story, we have that blue plus button badge. If you want to add another flag for close friends to add the green, feel free to do so. So the next thing we need to do is we need to populate the main meat and potatoes of our app, which is going to be that post feed. We kind of already have the scroll set up, but we want to be able to see those different users' posts. Before we do that, I'm going to add a divider after our little Instagram stories. Otherwise, let's go ahead and just like before, create a new file from template, SwiftUI view, and I'm going to call this one feed post. We're going to make the post kind of structure individually and then later on populate them through. I'm also going to unpin our preview of the canvas as we're going to be creating this, making sure it looks great, and then we'll populate it in the content view. Again, you will probably use the same thing where we kind of for each and loop through all those different things. All right, let's remove the text and we're going to create a couple of variables. The first one is username, and that is a string value. And then we're also going to have another one with location. It's also going to be a string, but we're going to mark it as optional with the question mark. It's not something that's always required when displaying the different posts. Now for our preview, we will get an error because we are requiring a username for the preview. So I'm going to go ahead and insert the username, and we can just put like placeholder. This way, when we are using the preview, we at least have something to pass along through it. Okay, we're going to be creating a VStack right off the bat in order to hold all of our elements. I think I'm also going to add some alignment here. And for this one, I'm going to make it leading. For the spacing, I think I'm going to do 0. I want everything to be pretty tight, and we don't need that content placeholder. Immediately right after, let's go ahead and actually create the header of the kind of post here. Go ahead and create a circle to hold the profile image. And if we really want, we could actually probably just steal it from the stories bar, right? And there we go. We might want to adjust the frame a little bit. They're usually a little bit smaller. I'm going to try 36 by 36. Okay, and still within our HStack, we're going to add a VStack in order to add some of the more elements within the header. I would again add some alignment. From here, I do leading and spacing. Let's add a little bit. We'll try out 2. Always feel free to come back and adjust these, by the way. Add our braces. And here's where we'll add the text, where we'll have the username. We can add some styling. I'm just going to make it subtitle. Next, we'll create some logic. So if we are passing through the location, so we could say if let location, from there we would display that location, which is a string value. So we could just add it like so. We can add some font. I'll change it up a little bit and maybe caption will probably look better. There we go. So we have the little icon and then the text that says placeholder. Outside of our VStack, let's go ahead and add a spacer, which should push everything. Afterwards, I'm going to add the system image of the ellipsis. So ELLIPSIS. I'm going to find the one I want. And this is a really cool thing to kind of indicate people that you can click on it and there's more. You can even see tagged action. Go ahead and drag that on in. And I want it to actually rotate. I want it to be like kind of vertical. So what we can do is we can use the rotation effect. From here, we can assign it degrees, and we'll give it the 90 degrees. So it should be kind of more vertical instead of horizontal. So people will know, you can kind of see on the right side, that they can probably click on this and like, report or, learn more about the post. Okay, let's go to the end of our HStack here and let's add some padding. Again, we're going to be doing horizontal padding because it's all the way on the side of the screen. We can also add some vertical padding as well. Coolio. Okay, let's add a ZStack in order to now populate the different media. I'm going to be first just doing a kind of rectangle with a little photo icon, and then maybe at the end we'll explore adding some actual images. So let's do a rectangle. We'll add some fill. And let's use gray. Just gray is pretty good for placeholders. We'll add an opacity. Add a frame, and we're going to set the max width to go to infinity. We actually want this to span to the sides. Okay, and let's add an aspect ratio. And for the content mode, let's set it to be fit. You also might want to set the aspect ratio itself to just be 1 and then the content mode afterwards. Okay, and now let's add an overlay. And this is where we're going to be using the system image. So let's go ahead and grab the one that should just be for photo. There we go. Let's go ahead and drag it on in there. Go ahead and load it. We'll probably have to adjust the size most likely. Yeah, there we go. Okay, let's definitely adjust the size of this. So we can set the font and let's actually create a custom size and let's try 90. All right, you can kind of now envision what that post might look like. Outside of our ZStack, let's go ahead and add those actions, just like we did with the top bar where we had like the messages, etc. We're going to create an HStack, and within that HStack, I'm going to do a little bit of magic, and I'm actually going to put a second HStack within HStack. For the second one, I'm going to add a little bit of spacing. Let's try 16. Okay, just like before, we're just going to use our system images. So I'm going to grab the one for heart to like this image. Then we're going to do the bubble. I'm going to choose the dot right to kind of present people that they can comment. And then we're also going to be doing the paper plane, I believe. You can also send posts as messages, right? That sounds right. And then let's set all of these to have a font. Let's do title too. And before we kind of see what it looks like, I'm just going to add one more thing. We're going to add a spacer, and then we're actually going to add the bookmark in order to bookmark those different posts. Let's also add the font style of title too. Oh yeah, it's all coming together. Although we probably want a little bit of vertical and horizontal padding again. Let's go ahead and add our padding, do vertical, and a little bit of horizontal. Okay, after this, we need to add some text to basically say that people have liked the images, things like that, comments, etc. So we can fake that one till we make it. Okay, within this view, we're just going to be adding a ton of text. Okay, after that, I've just added a really quick VStack that kind of says liked by, has a bunch of text. And this is just going to recreate the kind of process of showing who's liked it, kind of who's viewed, when it was posted, the comments, right? You can kind of take your creative liberties with how you want to present this. Again, I would probably add some padding. Honestly, I'm just going to copy and paste what we did above. It feels a lot more uniform. If you want to apply font to the entirety of the stack, you totally can. I'm going to set it to be footnote. And there we go. There is the placeholder for our posts. Now, the reason we also set the aspect ratio to 1 is that means it's a perfect square fit. The action row mirrors the Instagram one with the actions, the kind of bookmark, etc. And we've used the text composition down here. I just kind of put some boilerplate, just whatever text in order to kind of recreate how that looks and feels. Okay, and before we go to the content view, we're going to make another file from template, and that's going to be the feed list where we can actually loop through and populate these. We can call it feed list. Remove our placeholder, and we're going to have a LazyVStack this time because we're going up and down. We'll set our spacing to be 0. And from here, we're going to do our good old friend for each. And this time I'm going to do 0, ... Let's do less than 6. We're going to create our index again. So IDX in, and this is where we're going to reference our feed post this time. We're going to have our username. And if you really want to, you can choose the autofill with location, because I'll show you a little trick how every other one will just put in a fake location. For the username, we're going to have user underscore, and then we're going to do our string interpolation trick and include the index. For the location, we're going to have this be based off of the index, and we're going to do our %2 for that kind of remainder, double equals 0. And then from here, we'll do our, obviously what it's called, ternary operator. And let's have it be Cupertino, California. And then we'll do our otherwise, we'll have it just be nil. Cool, and then after each one of these, let's go ahead and include a divider just so they're separated a bit more. Now hopping back on into our content view. Now in our content view, let's go ahead and add the feed list because we want to view all of them. Let's refresh our preview and see what we're working with. And there we go. This looks pretty great already. We have your story with the plus button. We have the sample ones that we can scroll through. We can say user 1, 2, and every other user is going to have that location. Although I do need to fix my quick text on the feed post. What did I do wrong here? And there we go. We can see our entire interface. It looks pretty clean already. We can scroll through. Every other one of these has that the users from Cupertino, CA, right? At the very end, I'll show you a kind of data model that you can use and eventually plug all these things into. But this is looking pretty sweet. The one last thing we need to do for our UI before we can kind of wrap up and do some polish is the bottom tab. However, we're not going to be taking care of the other actual pages today. So once again, our good old friend, new file from template, SwiftUI view, and we'll call this one bottom tab bar. In our content view, we can go ahead and add it and we can pin our preview again. So it's not going to be part of our scroll view. So we're going to go down 2 braces, add another divider, good old friend divider, and then reference that newly created bottom tab bar. Let's go ahead and pin it. So as we're working on the bottom tab bar, we'll be able to see what's really going on. Okay, let's remove our placeholder. And from here, we're also going to create a state private var, which is going to be the selected. This is going to be based off of integer value and by default 0, and default 0 is going to also be our home. Within our body here, we're going to create a HStack, and we're going to want to actually populate this with TabItems. So just like we did with our story items, let's go ahead and create a new struct here, and we'll call it TabItem. also going to be a view. We're going to have a few items. We're going to have these be constants. So this one's going to be an icon, which is a string because we're going to be using the system images. Then we're also going to have an index, which is going to be an int value. And again, that's also where we're going to be having the selected, so we can kind of control that index. We're going to then create our binding, which is going to be based off the variable of selected and that integer. Cool. Let's go ahead and create a variable body, which is some view. Within here, we're going to be adding our styling. So we can create a VStack. We're going to have our image. And for the system name, we're just going to be passing through that icon string. And we can add some styling. Let's make them title 2, one of my favorite fonts, good old title 2. And then we're going to include a foreground style. And from here, we can actually control how it's being highlighted. So if it's selected, we're going to have the index. We're going to use our ternary operator again. So if it's selected, it's going to be primary. Otherwise, we're going to be using secondary. You can, of course, adjust these colors as you'd see fit. Afterwards, we're going to be adding a frame. Let's add a height of 40. And then we're going to be adding a content shape. I'm going to set this to be rectangle. And then on tap gesture, just to kind of, really handle how this works. Again, you'd probably want to use an actual tab bar and all that in a real app. This is not really meant to provide navigation today. We're going to basically say, okay, whatever is selected is going to be the index. Again, we're kind of doing this roundabout code instead of just using tab view and then navigating to those different views. Feels a little bit goofy, but it is what it is. Okay, let's do our tab icons. So for the string, again, feel free to use that object library. We're going to be doing the house.fill for this first one. And then we're going to start our index at 0. And then for the selected, we're just going to be doing the binding based off of that selected integer. After each one of these, I'd recommend adding a spacer. I'm going to quickly add the other ones. And there we go. So I did magnifying glass plus fill, play rectangle, and person circle. Before we go ahead and see our work, let's go ahead and add some padding. I'm going to first add some horizontal padding. Let's set this to be pretty high. And a little bit of vertical padding as well. And there we go. We can see we have our bottom tab down here. And when we click on them, they kind of get highlighted to that primary color. Again, real app, handle that as you wish with an actual tab bar navigation. But that pretty much is a wrap on our recreation of the UI. There is a lot of bones here that you can really start to create your own social media or even kind of just base a working demo off of this project. This was a purely UI build. However, we can really, recreate this UI in SwiftUI and see how Instagram may have created their own app. Now, before we wrap up, I'm just going to also include an example of how you can kind of make this with a post. This is like the minimum data and reusability that we'd actually want to use. So you might want to have a UUID, a unique identifier for all these different posts, username, location, these different image names, right? We were just using the placeholder, but you can totally grab the image name, whether that's a URL or things that people are uploading, etc. There's a like count, which you can control by an integer, as well as a caption string. This is just completely an example. For real apps, move models to a view and then fetch. So what can we do to really polish this? Well, first things first, definitely add accessibility labels on badges, any of the buttons, interactivity of the app. Also try to use, a certain font, maybe footnote for any metadata, caption 2 for any timestamps. You might want to add your own branding, support light mode and dark mode automatically via system colors. You can also add some state private variables for liked in order to kind of trigger when you press on, say, this heart button, that it actually flips over to a red heart. So essentially today we decomposed a complex UI into very small SwiftUI pieces, then recomposed the screen using stacks, lazy containers, our different scroll views, etc. There's certainly a lot more functionality and flair that you can add to this app, but this is how you can recreate the UI of Instagram. If you want to use a real image in the overlay of the post, replace the system image with whatever the image is. If you're using like multiple images, you might want to actually create a variable or something and kind of track where they are. And then afterwards add the .resizable so it's able to fill. And then just make sure it's in your assets with the correct name. But there you go. There is our example. Everyone has the same picture today. of our UI recreation of Instagram. As tackle adding that logic, really making it your own, totally feel free to do so. Otherwise, dream big, code bigger. We'll see you in the next one. And the sample project for this is available in the description below on my GitHub pages. So if you missed something or there's a little bit of text you didn't grab, feel free to check that out.